we're going to go ahead and get started with a couple songs here. If you go ahead and stand up, and we will sing a couple songs. All right, we're going to sing 3 songs, and then Troy is going to pick our 4th song as a request. So we're going to get started with Lord, I Lift Your Name on High. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I love to sing your praises. I'm so glad you're in my life. I'm so glad you came to save us. You came from heaven to earth to show the way, from the earth to the cross, my debt to pay, from the cross to the grave, from the grave to the sky. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I lift your name on high. Lord, I love to sing your praises. I'm so glad you're in my life. I'm so glad you came to save us. You came from heaven to earth to show the way, from the earth to the cross, my debt to pay, from the cross to the grave, from the grave to the sky. Lord, I lift your name on high. Every move I make, every move I make, I'm making you. You make me move, Jesus. Every breath I take, I breathe in you. Every step I take in you. You are my way, Jesus. Every breath I take, I breathe in you. Waves of mercy, waves of grace. Everywhere I look, I see your face. Your love has captured me. Oh my God, this love, how can it be? How can it be? Every move I make in you. You make me move, Jesus. Every breath I take, I breathe in you. Every step I take in you. You are my way, Jesus. Every breath I take, I breathe in you. Waves of mercy, waves of grace. Everywhere I look, I see your face. Your love has captured me. Oh my God, this love, how can it be? How can it be? Jesus, love my soul. Jesus, lover of my soul. Jesus, I will never let you go. You've taken me from the miry clay, set my feet upon a rock, and now I know I love my Lord, till the very end. Jesus, lover of my soul, Jesus, I will never let you go. You've taken me from the miry clay, you set my feet upon a rock, and now I know I love you, I need you. Though my world may fall, you'll never let me go. My Savior, my closest friend, I will worship you until the very end. Worship you, my Lord, until the very end. Worship you, my Lord, until the very end. What you got for us, Troy? We got it. Light fire, let's do it. I stand to praise you, but I fall on my knees. My spirit is willing, but my flesh is so weak. Light the fire in my soul, fan the flame and make me whole. Lord, you know just where I've been, so light the fire in my heart again. I feel your arms around me as the power of your healing begins. I feel this flowing through me like a mighty rushing wind. Light the fire in my soul, fan the flame and make me whole. Lord, you know just where I've been, so light the fire in my heart again. So light the fire in my heart again. You'll be seated.
Hello, y'all. It's nice to see you. We're glad that you're here on a Wednesday night. I'm glad it's not raining yet. I'd say we can all be thankful for that. Because of the rain, TNT is actually going to be postponed to this week. So instead of tomorrow here at the building, they're going to meet at 11 a.m. on Friday at Mission Barbecue. Which sounds like kind of a nice trade, I would say. Prayer requests, Jason Welch, we're still praying for him. He has a surgical consult on Tuesday to find out about getting his gallbladder out. Buck, who's had knee surgery, you're here. Okay, apparently Kay's doing much better, I guess. Yes? But are you doing better? I'm very pleased. We've been praying for you. So Buck is doing better, and he's still receiving visitors? Yes. Okay. and phone calls. He is at Center Point, recovering from his knee surgery. Susan Hunter is also recovering slowly from her accident. And we want to thank everybody who's providing meals. I know that means an awful lot to her, and it means a lot to Jay, who can't always be here to provide for her. So Jenny's sister, Louise, just got out of the hospital with pneumonia, so she'd asked us to be praying for her sister as well. Latin Dance Night is this Saturday. RSVP by this Friday. So it is Saturday night at, I do not know how to say your last name, at Nikolai and Langley's house. And oh, it is. There's a lot of people who live there. So if you get to go, I expect many photos to be posted on Facebook because I cannot be there. So I really do. Okay, actually, I prefer video. Short videos that we can see because that's the fun part of this entertaining evening. Be sly and take lots of videos. So Making Room is going to be the following weekend, so 18th through the 20th. Prayer stations. What I didn't say Sunday is we are going to have 3 stations specifically for children. It will be amazing for you to take your kids through that. Alternatively, I will try to have me and maybe one other person who can also take your kids through if the only time you can come is when they're here, because I would like you to get some time just, in prayer stations for yourself. So, but it is going to be different windows of time. There's an artistic one where the response is artistic. There's going to be a guided meditation station and probably 8 others here at the building. So plan to come, lots of windows of time. So the bridal shower is that Sunday right after church at Allison's house. If you have not signed up, the sign up is on my profile page in Breeze, meaning your own my profile page. If you can't find it, just text me. If you can't find that, look on the church website, and there's a phone number, and that phone number also comes to me. So all of those ways you can find me and let us know, let Allison know how many people are going to be there. So church retreat, March 3rd through 5th next year. That is so close. It sounds like not that far, but when you're planning trips as far as a family, it's something to think about. So save the date. Registration begins next week. Be looking for that. We have a soup cook-off coming. That is happening, the week after, so the Wednesday after Thanksgiving, so 11:30. Plan now. Start looking now for all your soups that you're going to bring and amaze us. I would like to, I don't know, there's bragging rights in there somewhere, so I plan to come and try everything. Come at 6:30. It's a little bit earlier, but at least that gives us time to set up. Yeah? Yes. Soup and fellowship, lots of fun. We'll be hanging out together and just enjoying the evening. So that's part of the blessing of being in a church family. You actually have family to come together and hang out with. So that's the joy. Christmas party is going to be Sunday, December 4th, 5 p.m. Just be prepared now. If you see something awesome as an elephant gift, grab it while you're thinking about it. So have an elephant gift. Parents of young children, be thinking about a $10 gift that you can bring, one per child that you have, so that there can be an exchange there. Sign-ups are also going to be next week so that we kind of know how much food to order, okay? Actually, it might be sooner than that. It might be tomorrow. So be looking for the sign-up that's coming in the text. Also, we have these really cool mugs now that have the CrossWay logo. I don't know if you guys can actually see that or not. They are going to be on sale for $5. If you would like a mug to be happy about the fact that you belong to this family, you are welcome to talk to me, and I will be at the welcome station different times, and we will figure out a way, probably through Venmo, maybe cash. I'm not real sure what other ways, but we'll figure out a way for you to pay $5 to get a mug. And it's birthday time and anniversary time. So who has a birthday? Okay, apparently you're pointing to Janet. Okay, Janet has a birthday. Ah, yay. Okay, Janet has a birthday. When was it? Tomorrow. Okay, we're celebrating your lovely life. I have been told that Fred had a birthday or has a birthday coming. I'm not sharing. I don't tell on people, but I heard that you have a birthday. This week? Okay, stand up. Who else? I see another pointing. Okay, you also have a birthday. When was it this week? Tomorrow. Okay, so Brian, Fred, and Janet. All right, so apparently we're doing it in that order because that's how I said it. Brian, Fred, and Janet. Anybody else? Did we miss anybody? Okay, Nick is starting the song from back there. To you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, dear Fred and Janet. Happy birthday to you, yay! All right, anniversaries. Those are super important. None this week? Okay, then we'll have a 5-minute fellowship break and come back.
All right, everyone, let's get started. If you would, turn back to Acts chapter 1. It's where we were last week when we started. While you're turning there, Bonnie asked me to if you could be praying for her and some of her friends and spiritual mentors from her home church in Lake Worth. Unfortunately, there was a tragedy and 2 people died. So please be praying for them. No time for details on that right now, but just please be praying, if you would, for Bonnie and the church down in Lake Worth for her. Also, I really want to encourage everyone that possibly can go to enjoy the dance at Nikolai's and Langley's house, and they, or the Koropanovs, whatever one you like to say. All right, but Nikolai is an expert in Spanish dancing, and he really will be able to tutor all of you in that. I've heard. So, but guys, it's things like this that help us to have fun and grow together as a body. So when you are there, when you have the opportunity to do that, you know, you won't regret going to things like that. You won't regret the relationships you get closer to. It's kind of like going to the retreat. You know, it's like, oh man, it's the time and all these different things, and you go and think, oh, man, this is such a good thing. And so spending time together, enjoying things like that are really, really great. So we're going to continue talking about what we started last week. And if you turn to Acts chapter 1 and verse 1, Luke writes, and he says this, in my former book, Theophilus, I wrote about all that Jesus began to do and to teach until the day he was taken up into heaven, after giving instructions through the Holy Spirit to the apostles he had chosen. After his suffering, he showed himself to these men and gave many convincing proofs that he was alive. So, why is it you think that Jesus had to give many convincing proofs that he was alive when he was sitting there talking to them? It is interesting. It's like, why do you think that that's true? Because if I was talking to you, you would think, well, he's alive, right? But what if I really had just died, and you guys went to the funeral and saw I was dead, and then I came back 3 days later, you think, what's going on here? This is not a normal occurrence, right? So I think sometimes we don't realize we grow up hearing that Jesus rose from the dead, and so we just accept that. But to them, there were so many things that was wrong with this picture, but one of them was they saw what happened to him on the cross. They saw that he was in the tomb, and they did all these things, and then all of a sudden he's talking to them. This is an amazing event in history, the most amazing event in history that ever has happened. And so even though they saw him, what might they think was going on? Maybe he was a ghost. All right, and so what did Jesus do to prove that he wasn't a ghost? Because they thought he was a ghost. He ate some fish. What else? He let them touch him. And the scars in his hands, and they were able to do that. So Jesus realized that, hey, this isn't a normal occurrence for them, and so he let them touch him. But it sounds like he's more than that, because he gave them many convincing proofs. So what would Jesus do if he was going to give these people convincing proofs that he was alive besides touching them, or that he was alive besides eating with them? What else would he do? What do you think? What's that? Live life with them. They were around him, seeing him walking, interacting with him. Remember, he cooked some fish for them, and he did several different things. What else would he do? Okay. Okay, talk about some of the experiences they had together, so they knew it was really him. Yep. So one of the things he did, and one of the things that you see in the scriptures that the apostles did, was they went back into the Old Testament. The foundation of the people that were sitting listening to him grew up learning to read the Old Testament. That's how they were educated. That's what they grew up with. That's what they were taught. Their whole life, their whole week revolved around the Old Testament. Everything about it. And so he went back and he started teaching them, I'm sure, part of this. And if you read in Acts chapter 16, that's what Paul does over and over and over again. He uses the scriptures, meaning the Old Testament scriptures, to prove that Jesus was the Christ. We're going to do a little bit of that, but I want to talk to you first about a couple different things. I want you to look with me in Acts chapter 26, verse 26. And the reason why is, again, in our culture right now, if you ask people if they truly believe with all their heart that Jesus rose from the dead, I think you would find a lot of people say, I am not really sure. And so it's really hard to have someone commit their life to something that they're not really sure about. And if you're going to convince somebody that Jesus, if you can't help them to see that Jesus rose from the dead, then they're going to have a hard time believing the whole Bible. But if you can convince them that Jesus rose from the dead, then they're going to have a much easier time understanding that the whole Bible is true. So this is a really critical thing, and I think that's one of the reasons why Jesus spent time with it. So in Acts 26, verse 26, I want you to read this along with me. So we'll go and start up in verse, I'm in the wrong section, I wonder that didn't make sense. We're going to start in verse 24. At this point, Festus interrupted Paul's defense. You are out of your mind, Paul, he shouted. Your great learning is driving you insane. Paul's trying to convince Festus to become a Christian even though he's on trial before him. He says back to Festus, I am not insane, most excellent Festus. What I am saying is true and reasonable. The king is familiar with these things, and I can speak freely to him. I am convinced that none of this has escaped his notice because it was not done in a corner. So I stop and say that because the things that happened to Jesus weren't in some private little secret that nobody in the world knew about. It was something that was well known. And so how do we know historically, is there any evidence that Jesus actually lived, that Jesus actually was killed on a cross, and that Jesus rose from the dead? And if so, what was it? What is it? Mom? Okay, so there is an immense amount of writings outside of Christian people, and also Christian people, and also the New Testament, that say these very things. That, first of all, there is no question that Jesus was a historical figure. There is no question historically, no matter what anyone tells you, that Jesus was crucified on a cross. That is a fact historically. There are non-Christians and Christians. It's in Roman police records. There is no question that Jesus was crucified on a cross in Jerusalem. That's a fact. All right? There's also people who talk about some really interesting things. So I want you, if you could turn with me to, let's see this verse, Matthew chapter 27, verse 45. What I'm going to try to do is give you some fun facts about this and some things where hopefully it will help you a lot in your own faith. And there's people around you that you know that need to know that this is actually a real event. In Matthew chapter 27, verse 45, it says this. Hang on just a second. From the 6th hour until the 9th hour, darkness came over all the land. Is that a fact or not? Okay, some people are shaking their head yes. How do you know that's a fact and it wasn't just written in the Bible? Okay, Kevin brings up the records of an eclipse at that time. Actually, that's what some people said happened that caused it, but an eclipse is impossible at that time. That would bring darkness over the land. It would have to be a solar eclipse. It was a full moon. So it was impossible for there to be an eclipse that would bring darkness over the land. That's impossible. So, how do we know if this happened or not? Because there's people who are not Christians who wrote about it and made fun of the Christians. There's 2 of them recorded in history that said the Christians claim that this was a miracle from God because it's just an eclipse. But what they acknowledged was that Jesus was being crucified on a cross when darkness came over the land. So they acknowledged that Jesus was being killed on a cross, and at the same time he was being killed on the cross, there was a period of darkness over the land. And they also said it was an eclipse. But that's impossible. What they verified was that darkness did come over the land, and no one knew what it was, why it happened. Which is kind of interesting. Does that prove that Jesus died and resurrected? Well, it does prove that he died, because they said that he did. But the reality is, and they're not supporting it. They're making fun of the Christians because of their lack of knowledge of the astronomy. But the reality is, they were both wrong, and it actually confirms that there was darkness over all the land. And there's a lot of things like that. So this, as was mentioned by Paul, This was not done in a corner. This was something that the people knew about. That's why 3,000 people became Christian on the first day. And if you follow Christianity, it exploded in growth, which something strange had to happen in order that to do. So I want to just tell you some things we know for sure are facts historically by writings in Christians and outside of Christians confirming back and forth. First of all, we know that he lived, and we know that he was crucified. We also know that he claimed to do miracles. Both people that totally opposed him and people who supported him said he did. Some of the people who claimed he said miracles said that he was a magician and it looked like miracles, but it really wasn't. All right? So why I say that is there's no doubt that Jesus was doing some pretty amazing things. I don't know if have y'all ever seen the magicians? Have you ever gone to Las Vegas and seen those magicians? It is really amazing what they do, you know. But obviously Jesus wasn't a magician, but the reality is you could certainly convince somebody, but they were saying he was doing things that made them believe that, so it's interesting. It also confirms that Jesus had a brother named James, and other writings. This darkness is one of the things. We also know that he was dead. Now, a couple things that I want to bring up. Jesus, did he claim before he was going to be killed that he was going to be resurrected? Where? Several places in the New Testament. But you should know some of them, all right? A couple of them, if you want to write these down, John 11:25, John 12:32, Matthew 12:39. There's several different places where Jesus claimed that he was going to be resurrected. In Matthew 12, he says something really interesting. He says that the Son of Man will be just like Jonah, remember? 3 nights and 3 days in the belly of the whale. He's going to be the same. And it's interesting. This is just an opinion I'm about to give you, all right? So you can tell. But we say that Jesus died on Friday. I don't think he did. I think he died on Thursday because it has to be 3 nights. Thursday night, Friday night, and Saturday. That's my opinion. But different people have different views on that, but that's mine. Whether I'm right or wrong, it doesn't really matter because we just know he resurrected, but that's the point about it. But as you think about it, Jesus did make this claim. So it puts Jesus in a position of one, you guys, many of you have probably heard this argument, but I want to bring it up. Either Jesus is who he says he is, which would make him Lord, right? Because he claimed to be the Christ. He claimed to be resurrected from the dead. He predicted it beforehand, and afterwards he said he was resurrected from the dead. If he is not telling the truth, then he's one of 2 different people. He is either a liar, or he's what people would say in this description is lunatic. Maybe you heard Lord, liar, or lunatic. All right? So, is Jesus a liar? Does he have the characteristics of a liar in life? And are there any things to support what he said? We'll go to that in a minute. Is Jesus crazy? Is he so out of his mind that he doesn't make sense? And the answer is, that one's easy to rule out. So I want you to think about, is Jesus a liar or not? All right? So what evidence would you give? Say, I think Jesus was lying. What would you say happened to Jesus? We know he was dead. We know he was buried in a tomb. How do we know? Why do we believe he was resurrected? Any thoughts? Kevin.
Something happened that pushed people to behave in dramatic ways that would not be explained if they knew it was all a lie.
Okay, so Kevin brings up a point of people's lives changed so dramatically after Jesus was born, multiple people, which is one of the things we talked about last week. So remember when the apostles changed their life? So I want you to think of another one of those evidences, and I'm going to actually read something for you about this. And that is, one of the things that was dramatically changed, you got to think about this. If you grew up in a certain religion, let's say your parents and grandparents all grew up in a certain religion, and then you came down and wanted to change things, people would think, whoa, you don't do that, right? Imagine like 20 generations of people. Everything that you did over and over again, one of the things that the Jewish life was focused around was the Sabbath. Imagine taking the Sabbath away from these people. What would happen? You think something horrible is wrong. But what if thousands of them made a decision to give up the Sabbath for the Lord's day? And I want you to read this to you. And it says, this is just some early Christian writings, okay? And so one of the huge evidences that Jesus actually did this amazing thing is the Jewish people who fathered generation after generation after generation after generation all based their life around the Sabbath. They switched. And this is what it says. We learn from the earliest Christian writers after the New Testament, these writers testify that Sunday, the first day of the week, was the church's special day because it was the day of Christ's resurrection. Ignatius, in his letter to the Magnesians, I hadn't heard about the Magnesians before, says that those who were brought up in the ancient order of things, talking about the Old Covenant, have come to the possession of a new hope, no longer observing the Sabbath, but living in the observance of the Lord's day, on which also our life has sprung up again by him and his death. Another author, I shall make a beginning on the 8th day, that is the beginning of another world. Wherefore also we keep the 8th day with joyfulness, the day also on which Jesus rose up from the dead. Another one, Justin Martyr is a famous one. And on this day called Sunday, all who live in the cities and the country gather together to one place. And the memoirs of the apostles or the writings of the prophets are read, followed by teaching, prayer, and the Lord's Supper. But Sunday is the day on which we all hold our common assembly, because it is the first day on which God, having wrought change in the darkness of matter, made the world, and Jesus Christ our Savior on that same day rose from the dead. Guys, this is like an amazing, incredible change in people's whole life. They changed dramatically. Something had to happen that would change thousands of people's lives, to abandon things that have passed on from generation to generation to generation, and they changed it like that. What happened, Fred?
You know, in Acts 1, it said that he appeared to them over a period of 40 days. You know, if he had come to them just once, everybody would have said, oh, man, you were tripping.
Right.
You know, or twice. Nobody really, but to be over a period of 40 days, they had time to think about it. And you wonder, how many people did they talk about that weren't even in their immediate circle?
Okay, so Fred brings up a really valid point. Let's say that the apostles were really upset afterwards. They were remorseful. They were crying. And they said to some people, we saw Jesus, but no one ever saw him again. People think, well, they were just full of remorse, maybe hallucinated, something like that. But over 40 days, no chance. In addition to that, if you read in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 3, Paul writes to the church in Corinth, for what I received I passed on you as of first importance, that Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, that he was buried and he was raised on the third day according to the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Peter and then to the 12. After that, he appeared to more than 500 of the brothers at the same time, most of whom are still living, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles, and last of all, he appeared to me also as one abnormally born. Lots of people saw him. Lots of them. And lots of those people had friends that they told us saw him. And over again, the report was being spread, Jesus is really alive. And he's been seen by lots and lots of people. So again, you see this happening where the claims that Jesus made are being verified by person after another person. Well, some people might say, well, maybe Jesus really never really died. What's the likelihood of that and why? Any thoughts? Could Jesus have faked his death, his own death? And people are thinking, no, why not? Tell me why. There's some really key things.
The Roman soldiers were very experienced in being able to tell if somebody was alive or dead, and they went to break the legs of men to speed up the death.
Okay.
And they noted that Jesus was already dead, and they pierced his side, and out came fluid, clear fluid, which was the pericardial fluid.
You listened to that talk. All right, so a couple of different things that are really, this is really, really important though, is that a Roman centurion's job, so what's a centurion mean? He's in charge of how many people? 100 people. That means he's had some experience killing people. I'm sorry, but that's the reality of it, okay? So he kind of knows how to do this. One of their jobs at the cross was to make sure before people came down from the cross that they were dead. That was his job. So they went to the thieves. They were still alive. They smashed their legs. They couldn't push up. They suffocated and they died. They came to Jesus. They didn't smash his leg because they said he's already dead. I'm going to prove it. Sticks a spear, what I believe very strongly, for many, many reasons, in his heart. And water and blood came out, which talks about his death. But the point is, he was making sure that he was dead. All right? How else would it be impossible for Jesus to be able to fake it? All right? What happened when they brought his body down? What did they do to his body? If you read in the... Go ahead, Jenny. So they took Jesus down and they wrapped him in the linens and they wrapped him in the spices. Nicodemus and also Joseph of Arimathea. It was Joseph of Arimathea's grave. They wrapped him up with 75 pounds of spices. All right? Then they carried him and they put him inside of a tomb. The women followed him there with him. Brian.
The Romans didn't know Jesus very well, and they just trusted on someone else's word. That was him. They could have easily used the body double.
Okay, so the question of could there have been a possible body double? All right, so we'll come back that someone stole or did the body. But as far as knowing that Jesus was dead, all right, could someone have faked it been on the cross? Who would be able to know for sure that he wasn't dead that was at the cross? Romans may or may not. What about his mom? You're not going to fool a mom at the cross. You're not going to fool the people that have been with him for the last 3 years, spent time talking to him and seeing him and hearing him speak. That you won't fool those people. There was too many people there that knew who he was. So you wouldn't have been able to fool him. So they couldn't have tricked that. So when they stuck the spear in, it was definitely Jesus. And really, honestly, if you read in there, the Romans admit there was Jesus. The Jewish people admit there was Jesus. His followers admit there was Jesus. I don't think there's much question about it, but people bring up that. Let me go a little bit more to the spices for just a minute. So they wrapped him up in this cloth, and then they put him in this tomb, all right? So people who knew exactly where he was buried, for sure, it says the women followed him, was Joseph of Arimathea, Nicodemus, and the women, all right? Remember on Sunday morning, who goes to the tomb? Some people say they went to the wrong tomb. Impossible. The women had already been there. They saw him buried in there. They go to the same tomb. They were going to put more spices on him, and they were having a hard time saying, "How are we going to move the stone? It's too heavy for us to move. We're going to have to get help." All right. So they carried this body, wrapped him with all these spices, and so when they went into the tomb, what did they find? His clothes, right? If you were going to steal a body, would you take the clothes off first? Why would you do that? You get caught. And what else would keep someone from stealing the body? There were guards there to protect it from being found. There was also a seal across it. So it was a seal across the tomb. Not only was it a very heavy tomb, a heavy stone, I've heard it estimated at about a ton. So I don't know how much it really weighed. I just know it was a big stone. Okay, and the women didn't think they could move it themselves. Go ahead.
I would say that the Pharisees who opposed him so much wanted to see him make sure that he died, as well as they went to the Romans again and said, "Hey, we think some of his followers. He boasted about rising in 3 days. We think some of his followers may come and try to steal his body." And spread a rumor. So
Okay.
they're the ones that got the guards there, so they wanted to make sure.
So the guards were there to prevent people from stealing the body. So if you start looking at all these different things, the reality is the tomb was empty for some reason. Okay? So we know he died. We know he was buried. We know the tomb was empty. All right? So again, you start looking at this thing. So is Jesus the Lord or is he a liar? To be a liar, he would have to be miraculous to get somehow out of there by himself. Take the clothes off, which I don't think he would have done. But regardless of all those different things, you got to think about how in the world could someone fake all those different things. So there's a lot more things that you can go into, but I say all these different things because when you talk to people, there's so much evidence that you can do. There's so many good books written on this. There's a lot of them. This one is one I just read recently. I try to read a book on apologetics every year. This one's written by Jack Cottrell, The Reasons for Our Hope. He's got a lot of neat points in it. Unfortunately, Jack just recently died. Seems like an amazing person. Wrote a lot of books that I really love. But as you read, I urge you to read this. This is not hard to prove that something amazing and miraculous happened. So to say that Jesus would be a liar and fake all these different things and fool everybody around him, you have to have amazing faith. All right? So again, when you start looking at the many convincing proofs that Jesus is talking about, I'm going to give you some of those. I'm going to list them. If you want to take notes, I strongly encourage you to do that, because I'm going to go through some things that the Old Testament said about Jesus that narrow it down really, really, really small of a person who it could be. All right? So, number 1, born of a virgin is predicted in Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14. Isaiah 7:14, and it's claimed multiple places. Luke 1:26 is another one. So Isaiah 7:14 is what you want to write down. Now, I'm just going to read these heritage things that are really important. The Jewish people kept incredible records of the lineage of you were in. Why? The priesthood hinges on your background. You have to be from this line, from the line, so you could be in Levi, so that you could be a priest, right? So they kept very, very true. There's other reasons too. So what happened? Do we still have those records available for us? Do the Jewish people have them? The answer is no. And the answer is, when were they destroyed? 70 AD, when Jerusalem was destroyed. The records were destroyed also. So no one can actually prove that they're of that line anymore as of 70 AD. All right? So, just a side note, but it's kind of valuable to this. So in the Old Testament, it says that Jesus has to be from the line of the following people: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Judah, Jesse, and David, and there's others. So when you read the lineages in the front of Matthew and you see the different things, one of the things they're going is they're tracing that back and saying he is from that line to prove what was written in the Old Testament. And so all those different lines. So you start narrowing down from a big, huge population. It gets skinnier and skinnier. Where else do they have to? What other things they have to be? They have to be born where? In Bethlehem. All right? Why? Micah 5:2 says that the Messiah has to be born in Bethlehem. So we know that. He has to be preceded by a messenger. Who was the messenger? John the Baptist. That's in Isaiah 40, verse 3, and Malachi 3:1. Isaiah 40, verse 3, and Malachi 3:1. He's going to enter Jerusalem on a donkey. Believe it or not, that's Zechariah 9:9. And he's going to be betrayed by a friend, Psalm 41:9. And he's going to be sold for 30 pieces of silver, Zechariah 11:12. And they're going to take the money and they're going to throw it into God's house, which is what he did, and they're going to use it to buy a potter's field, Zechariah 11:13, which is what happened. So you start reading all these different things and think, a lot of coincidences. There's a lot of different ones. And I didn't bring up Psalm 22 and his death and all the different things. Isaiah 53 talks about his life and what he does on trial. So over and over and over again. So there's a book called Evidence That Demands a Verdict by McDowell. He gets 7 of those things that I just mentioned. And he says, what's the odds of any human ever in the history of time that was born in Bethlehem, was killed on a cross, and he takes several of these other things that I just read. The odds of it ever happening to any human. And so they did all these calculations with all the numbers of people, and maybe it's off a little bit now, but not very much. And so the odds were this: basically, if you take the state of Texas, which is a big state, you ever drive through there? It's a long ways. And you filled it 2 feet deep with silver dollars. And there was one silver dollar in there. What are the odds of you walking through there and picking that one out? That's the odds of finding one person that's ever lived that met 7 of the things we talked about. We talked more than 7. So to believe that those things are coincidences means you have more faith than winning. I mean, it would be way easier to have won that $2 billion lotto. The odds are way higher that you're going to win it. I actually tried, but I did not win it. Go figure, right? Didn't do it. All right, Luke was like, Dad, you got to do this. So I said, all right, I'm going to go do it. And I donated to someone else's money with that. But the point about it is, it's easier to win the $2 billion than one person to ever have lived that actually meets what the Bible says about Jesus. That's how rare this is. All right, so I want to just give you some fun facts right now, okay? So hopefully you will like these. I want you, we're going to go to 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 18, and I want you to tell me what's special or unique about this, all right? 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 18. Sorry, Karen, I didn't know which one of these I was going to go to, so I didn't give her the verses ahead of time. So, 2 Timothy 1, verse 18. It says this, may the Lord grant that he will find mercy from the Lord on that day. And I am reading the wrong verse. 1:8, that's what it is. He says, so do not be ashamed to testify about our Lord, or ashamed of me, his prisoner, but join with me in suffering for the gospel by the power of God. We're going to keep reading. Who has saved us and called us to a holy life, not because of anything we have done, but because of his own purpose and grace. This grace was given to us in Christ Jesus. The time has a beginning. As far as I'm aware, and I've read this in several books, the only religious book in the world that's been written in the past is the only one that's consistent with this fact that time has a beginning and that God had to exist before time began. And it seems like a simple thing, but this happens many times in the Bible. Another one is mentioned in Titus chapter 1, verse 2. There are others in addition to that. So the concept that God existed before there was time actually makes sense if you think if he created everything, he had to exist outside of time. So let's go to another one. So let's go to Hebrews chapter 11. These are just kind of fun facts. Verse 3. Does one of these things prove that the Bible is real? No, but you keep adding them up. It's pretty impressive. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 3, another fun fact. Says this. We'll do verse 2. By faith, we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. What's the fun fact there? Atoms. Okay, so the belief is, according to science, that the Big Bang concept happened, and that if you take it back to that point in time and that point in creation, that it is smaller than what the naked eye could see. And that is amazingly impossible thought. To think that everything we see in this universe right now came from something that was so small we couldn't see it with our naked eye. But we also know the power of an atom bomb. And so, but that's science. That's not me saying that. It's interesting, though, because if I would have read this and said, that's impossible, right? To make this whole universe out of something that's so small you can't see it. But that's what science believes. That it was created by something so small that the eye can't see it. Interesting, kind of crazy things. All right, here's another fun one. How about we go to Isaiah chapter 40, verse 22. I'm just writing this down because these are fun facts to share with people when they say things, oh, the Bible's not true. Now, the Bible is not a science book. It doesn't claim to be a science book. It is interesting, though. It is consistent with science in many ways. This is one of those things. Isaiah 40, verse 21, we'll start in. Do you not know? Have you not heard? Has it not been told you from the beginning? Have you not understood since the earth was founded? He sits enthroned above the word is sphere of the earth, not circle, and its people are like grasshoppers. So what's the big deal about this verse? They're claiming the earth is a sphere, a ball-like shape, instead of a flat thing. So it's interesting. There's a lot of people felt like it was a flat thing, and obviously it's not. And so this is one of those things that, let me see. There's another verse in Proverbs 8:27, if you want to write, it talks about the earth being a sphere as well. The Romans used to believe, when this was written, that the earth was flat. It was in 1520 that we figured out the earth was round. So it's a couple thousand years in advance. Kind of neat. Job 26:7, that the earth hangs on nothing. All right? That wasn't figured out until 1543. And it was believed at that time, a couple really fun ones I'll tell you in just a second, but the earth was flat and supported and the heavens moved around the earth. That was the belief until 1543. In the Japanese religion, the earth is on the back of a giant catfish, and earthquakes are when the fish splashes its tail. Hindu beliefs, 4 elephants are holding the earth up, and also when the elephant scratches, it's an earthquake. Greeks believe that Atlas held the world on his back. So I'm playing a little bit, but I'm not trying to make fun of other things. I'm just trying to say, at the time the Bible was written, these statements are insane. Nobody believed anything like them. Nobody thought the earth was round. People thought the earth was supported by something. They thought it was flat. And again, we see over and over again. There's a lot of really interesting things like this. Another one is that the Bible claims that all land has been underwater. It's many, many places in Genesis 1, Genesis 7, Psalm 104. Again, it makes these claims over and over again. When did we figure out that the all earth has been underwater? 1885. Verified by Edward Seuss. He was a geologist, not Dr. Seuss that writes the book. The water vapor cycle seems so obvious to us now. That was talked about in Job 36, which is probably, some people believe, the oldest book in the Bible. It was figured out in, Aristotle actually proposed this theory, but only on a small local area, just in the local area. And Magellan had some things to do it. In 1770, Benjamin Franklin showed that storms move across the Earth's surface. So the things that are predicted thousands of years in advance, that are talked about as just facts. It's interesting. There's the paths in the sea. That was figured out in 1806. Probably about 1850. I want to go to medicine just for a minute, all right? You guys have heard the story, I think, of the hand washing thing. This is a really profound thing, though. And the hand washing goes back to Exodus chapter 15, verse 26. I just want to talk to you a little bit about this because I think it's... no, that's the wrong one. Exodus 15:26 says something that I forgot. So when Moses came out of Egypt, God tells him that if he follows the rules and the laws that he gives him, that he will not get the diseases of the Egyptians. And it's a fascinating study. If you want to go back, there's a thing called the Ebers Papyrus. You can go back and read the medical beliefs of the Egyptians when Moses was being raised. It's really fun. All kinds of different things to make your body do all kinds of different things. You would not want to have those treatments. But one of the things they did talk about in Leviticus 13 is what to do if you came into contact with a dead animal, a dead body, or anything like that. And it's fascinating. It tells you to make this certain kind of equipment together, certain kind of things. You mix them together, basically making a soap. One of the things that they had, and there was a hyssop plant. The hyssop plant has this stuff called carvacol, which is very similar to something we use called thymol. And what that does is it's an antifungal, antibacterial soap that he makes. And the stuff they mix in it makes it kind of like lava soap. You got hard to get off your hands. And that's what they had to wash with. And you got to think about that because in the Egyptian background that Moses had, they would actually use manure sometimes for wounds and things like that to protect them, as awful as that sounds. But the concept of washing your hands did not become a medical fact until the late 1800s. You're talking about something that's 4,000 years ahead of time. And this concept is really pretty amazing because the first guy that ever figured out that you should wash your hands is a guy named Dr. Semmelweis. And Dr. Semmelweis lived in Austria, and he was a guy he was an obstetrician gynecologist, and every morning he would take his medical students, and they would go and try to figure out why the women were dying so much. 20% of the women that delivered in the hospital were dying. And they couldn't figure out what was wrong, and so they would go in there, we would do the autopsies first because they were worried about it. And they would cut the bodies open and try to figure out what it was, and they would put their hands in all this pus. And then they would go in and they would examine the women. Without doing that, they would keep giving them infection. Infection is called labor fever. And Dr. Semmelweis figured out that if he said, I'm going to start treating people, I'm going to have all my students and myself wash, and we're going to cut the death rate down. And he did. He cut it to less than 1%. And you know what the hospital in Austria did? They fired him and said he was crazy, even though he had all the proof. He went to Turkey. He did the same thing in Turkey, cut the death rate down to less than 1%. You know what they did to him? They put him in an insane asylum, put him in irons, cut his arm, and he died of a skin infection. A guy named Louis Pasteur and Lister figured it out 30 years later and said he was right. Why I say that is, we think that's such a normal thing to think because we know there's bacteria and viruses. Nobody knew this for 4,000 years. The concept of quarantine that we all had to do for COVID and these different things, you know where that came from? Moses. If you go back and you read the history of leprosy, you find that people were being, in Europe, the people would go door-to-door, salesmen had leprosy, passing it around to people. It wasn't until they went back to the Old Testament and said, Moses said to do this, they started, and they were able to stop the spread. So there's so many things in the Bible that are way, way, way ahead of time. And I'm going to give you one more, Psalm 31, verse 10. Let's turn there. I want to show you this. This is a significant thing. Psalm 31, verse 10. I know I've given you a lot of information. Why I'm doing this is to let you know that there are a lot of things you can share with people. You don't have to know all that I'm telling you right now. But if you knew 2 or 3 of these things, just talking to people, it might open somebody's eyes. It might get them to listen a little bit. They think the Bible is nonsense. Some people think it's just myths. I've heard people teach that. Psalm 31, verse, where am I at? 10, says this. My life is consumed by anguish, and my years by groaning. My strength fails because of my affliction, and my bones grow weak. There's many times in the book of Psalms it says something like this. What's going on scientifically? Any thoughts? Getting older. So what happens when you're stressed and in anxiety? What changes in your body chemically? Some of you medical people should get this one. Something goes up really high in your body system. Cortisone. What does cortisone do? It causes osteopenia. It causes your bones to get thinner. This is said many times in the Old Testament. Maybe a lucky guess. Why I'm saying that is there's so many things that you can do if you want to keep looking at this. One last one is this one. Why is it that in Leviticus 11 God says that you can't eat pigs, rabbits, rodents, crustaceans, and lizards? Any thoughts? Because those things all carry diseases. You ever heard of trichinosis? Trichinosis is, you guys probably haven't heard of this, but it's this, when you eat pork that isn't cooked well, that's why people tell you to cook the pork really well, because you can get these little things that get in your body and they grow into your muscles and they hurt bad. And so the reason why God was actually protecting his people, telling them to do those things. And there's so many things like this. Circumcision the 8th day. The reality is that's the highest vitamin K level is in your life. The days 2 through 7, you're more likely to bleed and hemorrhage because your vitamin K level is the lowest in your life. So, just a coincidence, right? God seems to know all these different things. Any questions about this stuff? I know I gave you a lot of information. I just want it to be kind of fun that you know those things. But you can look up so many different books. There's a book called None of These Diseases, which goes into a lot of this medical stuff. This book right here by John Oakes is great. It's called Is There a God? It goes into a lot of these things. The key, guys, is you have to actually take a little bit of time and gather this information. This is not hard, what I just did. It really is not. But people need to hear things where they realize maybe this book is true. Last week we talked about the way we live is the most powerful evidence that we can give. If we live a life of love, it's powerful. It changes lives. But if you have a life of love and you can give people some evidence and say, this is what's happening, you really can make a difference in lives. People do want to believe. They just have been told for so long that it's not true that they feel foolish to follow it. But the reality is we're being foolish to not follow it. the evidence that's overwhelming in the scriptures, all these things add up. It comes to a point in time, though, when you keep hearing this thing, and you read so many other things, finally you realize, this has to be true. That's the way we make decisions in anything. There's enough pieces of evidence. A lot of medicines, we don't really know exactly how they work. We just know that when we do this, this is what happens, because we've seen it over and over and over again. The Bible is like that. It changes our lives. It gives us incredible information of so many historical things which we didn't touch on tonight. And so don't let people or yourself be convinced that the Bible doesn't have validity. Not one of these things by itself would prove anything. But the 50 of them that we talked about, it's kind of interesting. Especially written by different people at different times, with different educations, with different backgrounds, with different languages. They didn't even know each other. And yet they've written all these different things down. So hopefully this is helpful. Any thoughts, any questions anybody has that want to add into here real quick? All right. So I do want to bring up Thanksgiving next week. All right. Now I know Thanksgiving not next week, but we have our Thanksgiving service next week, where we come in and we get to share things we're thankful for, people that we're thankful for. This is a really powerful time. The Bible really talks a lot about giving thanks always. I don't think we as a nation are very good at that. We're good at complaining, we're good at being critical, we're good at finding the negative. The church culture needs to be one where we're grateful. So I encourage each one of you to think about this, to pray about it. Not only just at that night, that Wednesday night when we'll have a chance to share, but I really hope that you do that regularly. Take some time this Thanksgiving season to thank God. One of the things we've done before is write psalms to God. Write your own psalm to Him. You can do that. You can also, there's a lot of different things we can do thankful. In my family, every Thanksgiving, we all write down things we're thankful for. If you come to eat in our house, you have to write something you're thankful for. We have a book that's about that thick now. It's really neat. But there's a lot of things that you can do. Don't just let it fly by and not learn to be more grateful. So I urge you to do that. Encourage the other people who maybe not be here. I know there's a lot of people with flu tonight. There's a lot, unfortunately. Be careful, wash your hands. There's people concerned about the storm and all these different things. I appreciate everybody being, and I'm really thankful for that. But let's make this Thanksgiving time a time to be thankful. Let's train our hearts, to train our minds to be more and more thankful than we are today. I think it can make a big impact. So, guys, thanks for your attention. Have a really great fellowship. Grow in your knowledge and your conviction that the Bible is real. I hope this has been somewhat helpful and eye-opening for you. Have a great night.